Hi there. I haven't seen it utilized a lot in recent times, except for a couple of recent videos that I've done, but for a good while, whenever there was discourse about socialism on the internet, somebody would have to chime in with, "But Venezuela," as, some sort of gotcha moment. The narrative purported by both conservatives and liberals alike is that the country is in shambles because of the PSUV's attempt to bring socialism to Venezuela. Not only does placing the blame for any issues that Venezuela has faced on socialism completely ignore the mountains of sanctions and direct meddling from the United States, as well as the fact that just because a socialist party is in power doesn't mean that a country is, as a whole, socialist. Hakeem makes a great point about that. But it also ignores the achievements made under the leadership of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro in the face of US imperialism. So, in a not-so-subtle transition, I'll be listing off 10 achievements of Venezuela as they continue to fight to bring about a socialist system, in no particular order. Number 10. Support for Palestine. Starting with something extremely relevant today, Venezuela, since embarking on a journey towards socialism, has been an ardent defender of Palestinian self-determination and freedom against the genocidal apartheid state imposed by Israel. Both Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro have spoken against the Israeli occupation at the United Nations, and in 2014, after the brief war in Gaza, Venezuela was one of the first countries to send aid to Palestine in both material and monetary forms. President Maduro would in 2018 condemn an act of senseless violence carried out by the Israeli government, wherein 50 Palestinian people protesting the move of the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem were met with brutal force. Maduro would reaffirm his and by proxy Venezuela's support for the liberation of Palestine when he said that, and I quote, "Venezuela will continue to support the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination and the establishment of their independent Palestinian state," end quote, when congratulating the government on their 32 years of independence. And once again, free Palestine. Number 9. Guaranteed housing. For over 10 years, there has been a particular campaign in Venezuela designed to bring guaranteed housing to everyone in the country. The Great Venezuela Housing Mission, as it's known, is an initiative to defeat homelessness and create better living arrangements for all people. Beginning in 2011, this initiative has, as of July 2023, led to the creation of 4.6 million homes that are guaranteed to the people of Venezuela as a social right, rather than as something to be left as empty spaces to be commodified and used for profit. In 2019, the United Nations even recognized Venezuela as one of the top nations for housing rights at their inaugural UN Habitat Assembly in Kenya. Number 8. Food distribution and food production. In line with the "but Venezuela" argument that people love to use, one of the myths about socialist countries and countries aspiring towards socialism is that under any system other than capitalism, people would be left starving left and right, and that bread lines would be a mile long apiece. As a method of countering the inflation in Venezuela's private markets, caused in part by the sanctions put on by the US, the Maduro government established the CLAP program, otherwise known in English as Local Committees for Supply and Production. This program provides people with monthly boxes of food and foodstuffs, containing such items as chicken, tuna, beans, rice, sugar, eggs, and much more. These CLAP boxes, according to Liberation News, only cost between 500 and 1,000 bolivars for all of these items in 2019, whereas items such as chicken sold in a private supermarket would cost upwards of 10,000 bolivars at the same time. As of 2022, Venezuela's internal food production is additionally on the rise. Throughout 2022, beef production grew by over 50%, dairy by over 30%, rice grew by over 24%, coffee by almost 20%, and several other sources of food and food products grew in production throughout the year. Number 7. Legitimate democracy. A staple of most regime change efforts orchestrated by the US, there are several claims made by the US government, media outlets including Fox News and NBC, the opposition forces within Venezuela, and other outside sources including the BBC, that Nicolas Maduro is a quote-unquote dictator who keeps having elections rigged in his favor. Not only is this wrong, in that the leader of the opposition in 2019 even admitted that the Maduro government is not one being headed by a dictator, but also in that the elections in Venezuela are completely legitimate. Even mainstream US news outlets, such as the Washington Post and Forbes, have admitted that the chance for foul play in Venezuelan elections is slim to non-existent given the ballot system used in the country. In fact, the article from Forbes that covered President Maduro's initial electoral victory in 2013 even said that the Venezuelan election system is one that could very well be used as a model for the entire world to follow. All the while, opposition forces boycott even being involved in the elections and then wonder why Maduro appears to win in such wide margins, and the United States props up people who haven't even been elected with puppets like Juan Guaido. Number 6. Worker control in small doses. Now, being that Venezuela isn't actually a socialist country, rather they are a country that is striving for socialism through the democratic process and hasn't taken the path of establishing a dictatorship of the proletariat, full-on worker control over the means of production, as far as can be seen, hasn't surfaced in the Bolivarian Republic. That being said, though, there are instances of workers in Venezuela taking control over factories and effectively seizing the means of production in the country on a smaller scale. In 2018, Kellogg workers were told that they had the weekend off to give the factory time to complete scheduled maintenance. This was a lie, though, and when the workers returned, they learned that the Kellogg plant had closed operations in Venezuela and had violated the union contracts of the workers with the very little severance pay that the company dished out. In response, with aid from the Ministry of Labor, the Attorney General, and other government agencies, the Kellogg Workers Union was able to take control of the factory and continue producing cereal for the Venezuelan people, calling it Socialist Kellogg. Additionally, in 2019, workers in Venezuela, mostly women, were able to take control of one of the establishments of the Thomas Gregg & Son Transnational Company, a company that, from what I can tell, is a part of the printing industry. Number 5. Their COVID response. Despite the economic stranglehold that the United States and other capitalist powers have forced upon the country, Venezuela proved to have one of the better strategies in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. When the US blocked Venezuela from being able to purchase medication to treat COVID and the IMF refused to provide financial aid, the Bolivarian Republic found other ways to flourish against COVID through their own efforts and through international solidarity efforts from Russia, China, and Cuba, among others. Likewise, measures that have proven to be a part of actually stopping the spread of the virus, such as quarantine and mask wearing, were day one measures in Venezuela, while in the United States, people argued that they shouldn't have to wear a mask to help protect their fellow human beings on the grounds of some vague idea of freedom. In addition, right from the get-go in the very early stages of the pandemic, the Venezuelan government provided economic protections for the working class. From the beginning, rent and loan payments would be frozen, and efforts were made to provide the workers with their regular wages, unlike in the United States, where people had to jump through a dozen different hoops just to apply for unemployment. The Bolivarian government, on the other hand, immediately sought to directly help their people in the midst of the chaos that came with the pandemic. Number 4. Multiple minimum wage increases. It took several states in the USA over 10 years to even come close to implementing a $15 minimum wage, while the federal minimum wage itself is stuck at $7.25 an hour. The Maduro government has, in its efforts to combat the inflation imposed in part by the economic attacks from the West, increased the minimum wage for workers to ensure they can access food, medicine, and other significant parts of everyday life. In 2018, in conjunction with the creation of a cryptocurrency designed to help fight mafia involvement in money hoarding, the minimum wage was raised by half a petro, which is the equivalent at the time to 1,800 sovereign bolivars. Once more, in 2022, a minimum wage increase of half a petro was enacted by the government, and on top of the 2022 minimum wage increase, food bonuses were increased as well to provide further relief to the working people. Number 3. Defeating coup attempts. There have been several attempts by the United States to overthrow the government in Venezuela. Sanctions are the most commonly utilized method of pushing regime change, But the West has also made more direct efforts, like military coups. These attempts go back all the way to the early days of Hugo Chavez coming into power in the early 2000s, but these attempts have gone up tenfold over the last decade or so. To go through every coup endeavor carried out against the Bolivarian government would take an entire video itself, especially given the Juan Guaido debacle, so I'm focusing on one in particular from 2020. In 2020, an attempted military invasion conducted by mercenaries trained in Colombia and supported by both the United States and the internal opposition party happened when a group of armed people tried to engage in an assault on Venezuela. Not only did the Bolivarian National Armed Forces take down a number of those perpetrating the paramilitary strike, but they managed to capture 2 of them who turned out to be American Green Berets. They were subsequently arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison. Number 2. Healthcare. Not unlike their allies in Cuba, Venezuela, in their push to achieve socialism, has invested as much as they can over the last 2 decades to provide the people of Venezuela with free, quality healthcare. Hugo Chavez even emphasized the necessity of such a system in building a revolutionary society in 2011. Especially over the last 10 years, there have been several examples of Venezuelan healthcare initiatives being designed for the betterment of the whole people. In 2012, for example, it was reported that Venezuela was going to have the largest intensive care unit in Latin America thanks to their construction efforts. In 2018, President Maduro introduced a measure to control the prices of medications, both as a part of an economic recovery plan and as a means to protect people from price gouging and prevent necessary medications from being taken out of the general public's reach. There have also been what are called solidarity pharmacies established in one community as a response to the crippling sanctions being levied against Venezuela. Cooperation between Venezuela and Cuba has allowed for several thousand Cuban doctors to be involved in the Venezuelan healthcare system, and throughout the years, several signs of a faulty medical system such as infant mortality, malnutrition, a lack of medical centers, and a lack of doctors have been significantly reduced. Number 1. Establishing communes. Communes don't equal communism or socialism. Yes, that's a given. But establishing them is still, as far as I know, a step towards building socialism. Venezuela ultimately isn't a socialist country when you look at different statistics like the private versus public sector disparities, among other issues. But they are on a path of building socialism modeled in some way after historical attempts like Salvador Allende in Chile, calling it socialism in the 21st century. As of 2020, there are over 3,000 communes involved with initiatives including People's Power and Popular Power, with over 2 million people being represented by these communes and their adjacent organizations. There's an account of being involved with these communes and collectives republished by Monthly Review from 2019 that entails their involvement with the aforementioned CLAP project, labor unions, as well as other aspects of the revolutionary spirit within the country. Venezuela isn't officially socialist for many reasons, and no, this isn't me saying it's not real socialism. If there isn't some form of the dictatorship of the proletariat at the state level, and the private economy is still in the majority, then it's valid to say a country isn't socialist, even if a socialist party is in power. But the efforts that they have been taking in working towards a form of socialism are commendable, to say the least. Let me know if there are any examples of existing socialism or attempts at socialism that you would want to see covered in videos like these. Before I end the video, I would just like to remind everybody watching that I have a Buy Me a Coffee where you can support the channel by donating as little as $1 a month if you have the means to and would like to. Any contributions would be greatly appreciated. If you're not in a position where you can contribute though, liking and sharing the video as well as subscribing is just as appreciated. Lastly, I'm also an Allison Courses affiliate. Allison Courses is a platform where you can take online courses in a wide array of subjects like history, video editing, nutrition, and so much more. Depending on the length of the course, you can earn either a certificate or a diploma with CPD accreditation. The courses themselves are free to take, but if you want to go the extra mile and receive an official copy of your certificate or diploma, you do unfortunately have to pay for it. But you can also download a learner achievement verification for free as another way of showing that you completed a course. Allison Courses is a great way to further educate yourself and, for many, a way to bolster your resume. You'll find my affiliate link to a course on the philosophy of Karl Marx in the description, a course that I have actually completed. It's not groundbreaking and it is flawed in some ways, but overall it's a decent introduction or refresher on Marxist philosophy. Clicking the link, signing up for Allison, and taking courses is another way that you can help support the channel. And just to be clear, this isn't a sponsorship. It's just another way to help support the work that I do for no real cost unless you decide to purchase a physical certificate. My name is Jymee. Thank you for watching.